The glass shattered against the floor. Alexander Kane's hand was shaking so badly, he didn't even remember throwing the crystal tumbler. Whiskey spread across the white marble like a stain that refused to disappear. "Sir, are you okay?" his assistant asked cautiously from the doorway. Alexander didn't answer. Outside the towering windows of his penthouse, the city glittered with millions of lights. He owned half the skyline. Tech companies, investment firms, luxury towers. His name was stamped across industries. But the phone in his hand carried the one message he couldn't buy his way out of. His mother was gone. He sank into the leather chair, staring at the screen again as if the words might rearrange themselves. "She passed this morning." His jaw tightened. He hadn't visited in 8 months. Not because he couldn't, because he was busy. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. The richest man in the room, and somehow the poorest son alive. But Alexander Kane wasn't always this man. Years earlier, he stood outside a rundown apartment building clutching a cardboard box filled with second-hand computer parts. His mother opened the door and smiled immediately. "Did you get the job?" Alexander sighed, dropping the box on the kitchen table. "No. They said I'm too young." His mother poured him tea. "You're not too young," she said softly. "You're just early." Alexander looked at the cracked walls, the broken stove, the bills piled on the counter. "I'm tired of being early." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You won't stay here forever." That night he sat on the floor assembling his first computer from scraps he'd collected. While other people slept, Alexander built. While friends partied, Alexander coded. While the world relaxed, Alexander obsessed. His best friend Marcus once leaned over his desk and said, "Bro, you haven't slept in 2 days." Alexander didn't look up from the screen. "Sleep is expensive." Marcus laughed. "No, it's not." Alexander finally turned toward him. "Time is." That obsession built something extraordinary. Within 5 years, Alexander launched a small software company from a garage. Investors laughed at him. Until they didn't. One product changed everything. A security system powered by artificial intelligence that major corporations began fighting to buy. Marcus ran into Alexander's office one afternoon, nearly out of breath. "You need to see this." Alexander barely glanced up. "What?" Marcus slammed a tablet on the desk. "Our valuation just crossed 1 billion. Alexander blinked. 1 billion. Marcus grinned. "Congratulations, man. You're officially a billionaire." For a moment, Alexander was silent. Then he simply nodded. "Good." Marcus stared at him. "That's it? Just good?" Alexander leaned back in his chair. "We're just getting started." And he meant it. The company exploded. Investors lined up. Governments called. Tech giants tried to buy him out. Alexander refused every offer. His schedule became brutal. Flights across continents. Meetings at midnight. Deals signed at sunrise. One evening his mother called while he was preparing for a presentation in Tokyo. "Alexander." "Mom, I have 5 minutes." She chuckled softly. "You always have 5 minutes." He rubbed his temples. "I'm building something important." "I know." Her voice was warm. "I'm proud of you." Alexander paused. Those words mattered more than the billion-dollar contracts waiting for him. "Thanks, Mom." She hesitated. "You promised to visit this weekend." Alexander glanced at the clock. His assistant was already knocking on the door. "Something came up," he said quickly. "Next week. Okay?" She was quiet for a moment. "Of course." When the call ended, he didn't notice the slight disappointment in her voice. He just walked into the meeting and closed another massive deal. Years passed in a blur. Alexander Kane became a global icon. Magazine covers, private jets, luxury penthouses in 3 countries. People admired him, feared him, envied him, but slowly, quietly, pieces of his life began disappearing. Marcus noticed it first. They sat together one evening in Alexander's enormous office overlooking the city. Marcus leaned back in the chair. "Do you remember when we used to eat instant noodles because we were broke?" Alexander smirked slightly. "Now we eat caviar because we're not." Marcus shook his head. That's not what I meant. Alexander finally looked at him. What's your point? Marcus hesitated. You've changed. Alexander frowned. Everyone changes. No, Marcus said carefully. You've replaced everything. Alexander's voice hardened. I replaced poverty. Marcus sighed. What about your family? Alexander turned back to his laptop. They're fine. Marcus stared at him. You missed your anniversary dinner last week. It was a billion-dollar negotiation. You missed your son's soccer final. Alexander's fingers stopped typing. That was one game. Marcus leaned forward. It was the only one he asked you to come to. Alexander closed the laptop slowly. Marcus, do you know what it takes to run an empire? Marcus met his eyes. Yeah. A heavy silence settled between them. And I also know what it costs. Alexander stood up, signaling the conversation was over. Some costs are necessary. Marcus nodded slowly. Just make sure the bill isn't bigger than the reward. Alexander didn't answer, because deep down, a small voice inside him whispered something uncomfortable. But success was loud, and success drowned it out. If this story is already pulling you in, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because what happens next will change everything Alexander believed about success. And the truth waiting for him was far more devastating than any business failure. Because the empire he built was about to show him the price of winning. And he was about to learn that some losses can never be bought back. The applause inside the conference hall was deafening. Alexander Kane stood on stage, smiling as cameras flashed nonstop. Investors, journalists, and executives filled the room, all watching the billionaire who had just announced the biggest acquisition of the year. Mr. Kane, how does it feel to dominate the tech industry like this? A reporter shouted. Alexander adjusted the microphone calmly. We're not dominating, he said smoothly. We're just beginning. More applause erupted. From the outside, he looked unstoppable. But while the world celebrated him, small cracks in his life were growing wider. Later that night, inside the back seat of his car, Alexander finally checked his phone. 27 unread messages. Most were from executives. 2 were from Marcus, and 1 was from his wife, Elena. He opened hers first. You promised you'd be home tonight. Alexander exhaled slowly and called her. She answered immediately. Are you coming home? She asked. I'm still at the event, he replied. Her voice tightened. Alexander, you said you wouldn't miss dinner again. I had to be here. This deal changes everything. There was a long pause. You always say that. He rubbed his forehead. Elena, you know how important this company is. And what about us? She asked quietly. Alexander didn't respond right away. That's not fair, he finally said. No, she replied. You missed Daniel's birthday yesterday. His stomach tightened. I sent a gift. That's not the same as being there. Alexander stared out the window at the passing lights. I'm doing this for our future. Elena's voice softened but carried pain. Our future is happening right now, Alexander. The call ended shortly after. He sat there in silence. For the first time that night, the applause from the conference felt distant. When he arrived home, the mansion was dark. The dining table still had plates on it. Cold, untouched. Alexander walked upstairs and peeked into his son Daniel's room. The boy was asleep, clutching the remote control car Alexander had sent as a gift. Alexander stepped inside quietly. For a moment he just stood there. Hey buddy, he whispered softly. Daniel didn't move. Alexander brushed his son's hair gently before leaving the room. But he missed the small note on the bedside table. A crumpled piece of paper with a child's handwriting. I wish Dad came. The next morning, Marcus walked into Alexander's office holding a file. You should see this, Marcus said. Alexander barely looked up. If it's another investor request, schedule it. It's not about investors. Marcus placed the file on the desk. Alexander opened it. Inside were headlines. Tech giant under investigation. Kane Industries facing ethical questions. Alexander frowned. What is this? Marcus crossed his arms. The new AI surveillance system. What about it? Governments are using it to track citizens. Alexander's expression hardened. That's not our responsibility. Marcus leaned forward. It becomes our responsibility when people get hurt. Alexander closed the file firmly. Marcus, this company employs thousands of people. That's not the point. It's exactly the point, Alexander snapped. Marcus studied him. Do you ever stop? Alexander looked annoyed. Stop what? Running. Alexander stood up. I'm not running. I'm building something that will outlast all of us. Marcus shook his head. Then why does it feel like everything around you is collapsing? Alexander's patience snapped. If you don't believe in this company anymore, maybe you shouldn't be here. The words hung in the air. Marcus blinked, stunned. You're serious? Alexander didn't answer. Marcus slowly nodded. All right. He picked up the file and turned toward the door. But before leaving, he said something quietly. You're going to win every business battle, Alex. Alexander looked up. But one day you're going to look around and realize there's nobody left celebrating with you. The door closed. For the first time in years, Marcus Kane was no longer by his side. But Alexander pushed the thought away and buried himself in work again. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, his phone rang while he was in the middle of another meeting. His assistant whispered urgently, "Sir, it's your mother." Alexander stepped outside and answered, "Mom, I'm in a meeting. Is everything okay?" Her voice sounded weaker than usual. "I just wanted to hear your voice." His chest tightened slightly. "I'll call you tonight." "You always say that," she said gently. Alexander looked at the conference room behind him. Executives were waiting. "I promise this time." She laughed softly. "You work too hard." "I'm fine. Just remember something," she said. "What?" "Money can build a big house, but it doesn't make it a home." Alexander smiled faintly. "I'll visit soon." "Okay," she replied. The call ended. But that visit never happened. Because 2 weeks later, Alexander received the message that shattered the glass in his penthouse. His mother was gone. Now he sat alone in the massive living room, staring at the letter the hospital had sent with her belongings. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. His mother's handwriting was unmistakable. "My dear Alexander," his throat tightened immediately. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to remind you to slow down." A tear slid down his cheek. "I was always proud of you, even when you were a boy fixing broken computers on the kitchen floor." Alexander clenched the paper. But success can cast very long shadows. Sometimes those shadows hide the things that truly matter. His breathing grew heavier. "I hope you never lose the people who love you while chasing the things that impress the world." The letter slipped from his hand. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Kane cried. But what he didn't realize yet was that losing his mother was only the beginning, because the empire he built was about to collapse in ways he never imagined. And the people he thought would always be there were already walking away. Before we reach the moment that changes everything, take a second to like the video and comment where you're watching from. Because the next part of Alexander's story is where the real consequences begin. The house felt enormous. Too enormous. Alexander Kane walked slowly through the silent halls of the mansion that once symbolized his success. Now every step echoed like a reminder that something inside his life had gone terribly wrong. The letter from his mother still sat on the table. He had read it 5 times already. Each time the words hurt more. Success can cast very long shadows. Alexander leaned against the kitchen counter and whispered to himself, "I was doing this for everyone." But the house gave no answer. The next morning, things got worse. His assistant rushed into the office holding a tablet. "Sir, we have a problem." Alexander looked exhausted. "What now?" She turned the screen toward him. News headlines filled the display. Kane Industries under global investigation. AI surveillance system abused by governments. Protests erupt against tech billionaire. Alexander's jaw tightened. This is exaggerated. Sir, 3 governments just suspended contracts. He stood up immediately. Call the board. Within an hour, the conference room was full. Executives, lawyers, investors. Everyone looked tense. One board member spoke first. Alex, this situation is serious. It's temporary, Alexander replied coldly. Another executive shook his head. Our stock dropped 30% overnight. Alexander slammed his hand on the table. We've survived worse. A lawyer cleared his throat. There's also a class action lawsuit forming. Alexander stared at him. For what? Violation of privacy rights. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something he rarely experienced. Uncertainty. One board member leaned forward. Alex. Maybe Marcus was right. Alexander's eyes narrowed. What does Marcus have to do with this? He warned us about the surveillance misuse. Alexander looked away. Marcus's words echoed in his mind. One day you're going to look around and realize there's nobody left celebrating with you. The meeting ended without solutions. But the real blow came that evening. When Alexander returned home, Elena was waiting in the living room. A suitcase sat beside her. His stomach dropped. Elena, what's this? Her eyes were tired. I'm leaving. The words hit harder than any financial loss. Don't do this, he said quickly. You're never here anyway. That's not fair. She laughed bitterly. Alexander, do you know what Daniel asked me last night? He said nothing. He asked if his father lives in the same house as us, or just visits sometimes. The words pierced through him. Elena, I can fix this. She shook her head slowly. You don't fix relationships the way you fix companies. Don't do this, he said quickly. You're never here anyway. That's not fair. She laughed bitterly. Alexander, do you know what Daniel asked me last night? He said nothing. He asked if his father lives in the same house as us, or just visits sometimes. The words pierced through him. Elena, I can fix this. She shook her head slowly. You don't fix relationships the way you fix companies. He stepped closer. Please. Her voice softened but remained firm. I waited years for you to choose us. Alexander felt his chest tighten. I thought I already did. No, she said quietly. You chose work. She picked up the suitcase. Daniel is already at my sister's house. Alexander felt panic rising. Let me talk to him. He doesn't want to talk right now. Those words crushed him. Elena walked toward the door. But before leaving, she turned back. You built an empire, Alexander. Her eyes filled with tears. But you lost your family while building it. The door closed, and just like that, the mansion became even emptier. Days passed. The company continued collapsing. Investors pulled out. Media attacked him relentlessly. But none of it hurt as much as the silence from his son. One night Alexander finally did something he hadn't done in years. He drove alone. No driver. No assistant. Just him and the quiet road. Eventually he stopped outside a modest apartment building. Marcus opened the door and froze. Alex. Alexander looked different. Tired. Older. I need to talk. Marcus stepped aside silently. They sat in the small living room. For a moment neither spoke. Finally Marcus said, I figured you'd come eventually. Alexander looked around the apartment. You left the company because of me. Marcus shrugged. No. I left because you stopped listening. Alexander nodded slowly. I think I stopped listening to everyone. Marcus studied him. What happened? Alexander's voice cracked slightly. My mom died. Marcus softened immediately. I'm sorry, man. Alexander stared at the floor. She tried to warn me. Marcus leaned back. She always did. Alexander laughed weakly. I thought success meant winning. Marcus replied quietly. It depends what you're competing for. Alexander looked up. I lost my family. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. Yeah, you did. The honesty hurt, but it also felt real. Alexander sighed deeply. Is it too late? Marcus thought for a moment. Too late for what? To fix things. Marcus leaned forward. You built a billion-dollar company from nothing. Alexander nodded. Yeah. So rebuilding relationships might take even more effort. Alexander looked uncertain. Do you think Daniel will forgive me? Marcus shrugged. I don't know. That answer stung. But I do know something, Marcus continued. What? You have to show him that he matters more than the empire. Alexander sat quietly for a long moment. Then he stood up. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. Alexander took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I'm going to stop chasing money. Months later, something unexpected happened. Alexander stepped down as CEO of Kane Industries. The business world exploded with speculation. But Alexander didn't care. Instead, he showed up at a small soccer field one Saturday morning. Children were practicing. Daniel stood among them. When the boy noticed him, he froze. Alexander walked slowly toward the sideline. Hey, buddy. Daniel looked unsure. What are you doing here? Alexander swallowed. I came to watch your game. Daniel glanced at the empty seat beside him. You never come. Alexander nodded. I know. The boy looked down. Are you leaving again? Alexander knelt so their eyes met. No. Daniel studied him carefully. Promise. Alexander smiled softly. Promise. For the first time in years, Alexander Kane wasn't thinking about deals, investors, or headlines. He was just a father watching his son play soccer. And somehow, that moment felt more valuable than the billions he once chased. Success had given him everything, but loss had finally taught him what truly mattered. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment the word family below. Because sometimes the greatest lesson in life is simple. You can rebuild a business. You can recover lost money. But the people who love you are the only wealth that truly matters.